we are going to turn a pretty straightforward, decent sounding wub bass like this and using some stock effects and some cool processing, we're going to transform it into this. Okay, here is the deal. In this video, I am absolutely going to show you how you can level up your bass sound design using just stock effects from Ableton Live. That is completely true. However, that's a bit of a Trojan horse, because what I'm really going to teach you is how to properly use audio effect racks and why you should not be leaving them on the cutting room floor. So it's kind of a 2-for-1. And to make it a 3-for-1, I'm just going to give you the rack that I am using in this video to demonstrate these techniques. You can go to the description, go to my website, and download it right now. What I'm most interested in for you is for you to have this process and to have these techniques down. So, like I said, if you just want that rack, go to the description. If you want to actually learn how to make racks like that for all types of instruments, keep watching. Also, just as a quick heads up, if you are watching this video, I really recommend watching it with headphones or over studio monitors. We're going to be dealing with a lot of low end and sub frequencies, and there's a pretty solid chance that your phone may not capture that entire range. So just a quick caveat and a heads up before we dive in. Okay, before we dive into Live, I actually want to help you visualize the signal flow, because the reason why a lot of the more advanced features of audio effect racks get left unused is because it complicates the signal flow and it becomes difficult to understand where the signal is going just by looking at Live itself. So by having this visual aid, it's going to be a little bit more helpful in understanding this concept. So normally we run our signal from our instrument into a chain of audio effects. This is called serial processing. We're moving in series. We go from the instrument into an effect, into another effect, and into another effect from there. But what if, say, you want to run the instrument into these chains of effects and also run it separately to another chain of effects, right? This is pretty common. We usually do this with return tracks in Live. Other DAWs will call them buses. And this is called parallel processing, where you split the signal out and you can send it to multiple places at once. Now, the really cool feature of audio effect racks that people leave on the cutting room floor is the fact that you can do both simultaneously. Let me explain. So, what we can actually do with an audio effect rack, which I have one up here, is we can take an instrument and we can split its signal to multiple places. So we can go into the audio effect rack and then the signal splits to each effect on a separate chain, as they're called. But then you can sum that output and then move on to further processing. So I tend to call this split processing. And what it allows us to do is it allows us to split the signal up, but we can rejoin it at a later time. And there are a number of ways and reasons why you can use this sort of approach. For example, say you want to use reverb and you want to use delay, but you don't want them on top of one another, because if your delay feeds into your reverb, it's going to be a murky, muddy mess, whatever. You could split them up this way and have the dry signal from your instrument go straight into your reverb and the dry signal from your instrument go straight into your delay. And then you can sum those signals back together and send that to your mixer, and you have control over the levels of each. Now, what I'm going to show you in live is how to split the frequency spectrum of an instrument using an audio effect rack so that you can process the different bands of the frequency spectrum independently of one another. That is how you create some really amazing effect racks that boost your bass sound design. So let's actually jump in and I'll demonstrate that for you now. Okay, so we're going to focus particularly on this first bass here. So I'm going to grab an instance of Spectrum, which Spectrum is Live's stock spectrum analyzer. I'm going to go ahead and expand it so we can have this view. So as we see here, this bass is covering a wide swath of the frequency spectrum. We've got the fundamental down here, hitting hard, hitting low at G0, and then a whole bunch of harmonics. Now, we want to process different bands of this signal with different effects. For example, if you want to do some cool stereo widening effects, you don't really want to do that way down here on the fundamental, because that's going to just cause some really weird phase issues. But it can be really cool in the mid-range and in the upper range. So to do that effectively, we need to split the signal up. And we're going to do that using an audio effect rack and Live's Multiband Dynamics tool. So Multiband Dynamics is a multiband dynamic processor, right? So it combines an upwards and a downwards compressor, and it splits the frequency spectrum into 3 separate bands. We're actually not going to really worry too much about this device. What is useful for us is that you can actually solo each of the bands. So for example, if we solo the low output, which by default has a crossover of 120 hertz, we get mostly that fundamental, versus if we solo the mids, we're getting mostly that mid-range, and the highs, as you can guess, right? So we can use this to our advantage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click and I'm going to select Group, and then I am going to hit this nice little button here. I'm going to, in fact, even zoom in so you can see this nice little button here, and that brings up the chains. And by default, every audio effect rack has 1 chain. But I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this 3 times. So now the signal has been split 3 times coming out of here. So I'm going to rename this one highs, and that high band is soloed. I'm going to rename this one mids, select it and solo the mids. And then this one I'm going to select and call lows, and I'm going to solo the lows. So now each of these chains are 1 band. Your lows, your mids, and your highs. So now that the frequency spectrum has been divided into these 3 bands, low, mid, high, we can actually process them separately. So I'm going to handle this pretty straightforward. We can get a really large effect with just a few audio effects each. So for the lows, I'm going to grab an instance of Saturator. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop it on the low chain. And it just places it right behind Multiband Dynamics, which is exactly what we want to do. Now, with the update to 12.1, Saturator now has this nice bass shaper mode. And all I'm going to do is just focus the low amount and add a little bit of drive and set it up to soft clip. Now we've got a really strong, powerful sub. And if I solo just the lows, that's going to shake any sound system. It'll probably need a little bit of attenuating in a full mix, but that's okay. For the mids, what I want to get is some nice width. If I solo these mids, we're kind of dead center mono. So I'm just going to grab Live's stock chorus ensemble and similarly drop it on the mids after Multiband Dynamics. And I'm just going to bring up the width and add a bit of feedback and warmth. So let me show you that. And you can set it to taste however you want, but this now takes that nice rich mid-range and it widens it out. And if we were to pull back in the low end here, that low end is still mono, it is still centered. So now we have width and we have weight, right? And we need a little bit of extra sparkle on the top end, we'll call it. So for that, I'm going to grab erosion and I'm going to place erosion on the highs. Now, the nice thing about splitting the bands using Multiband Dynamics is that we can also, of course, control the amplitude of each band. So I'm actually going to boost the input quite a bit here on the high and the output as well. Okay, so now we've got some more presence there. And I'm going to set erosion to wide noise, not to be confused with white noise, and set it to about 4K and increase the width. So without, with, and you can once again set it however you like. But it adds some of that grit and that nice top end that the style of bass sound design really warrants. So altogether, we've got a really, really powerful sound. Let me A-B it. Without our rack, with. And the cool thing is you can nest audio effect racks within audio effect racks. For example, I would probably run after this entire chain. I'd run a couple of effects. I would run utility so that I can just ensure bass mono. And then I would just put limiter because as I would start to play with various parameters, I might really boost the hell out of things. And so if I highlight limiter, utility, and this audio effect rack, and then group them all together, I now have this nice nested rack that has everything in it. And this is essentially what I did with this rack here, my bass brutalizer. I just needed a name. And I set up a number of macros and created some custom presets, and it's a little too much to cover in this video, but if you are interested in learning about how to best use macros and create presets, leave a comment and let me know, and I may add that to my video making rotation. But if you just want to pick apart this rack for yourself and learn how, the first link in the description is a link that takes you to my website where you can download this rack free and make some really cool stuff with it. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you not only got a cool free audio effect rack from this video, but you learned something both about audio effect racks as well as bass sound design. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm really working to try to actively grow this channel now, and that sort of support helps quite a bit. Until next time.